All right, it's a Tuesday edition of the Morning Pitt here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Like and subscribe while you're here. We'd very much appreciate it. Like this video, subscribe to our YouTube channel. Click that subscribe button right down there, and you will never miss any of our exclusive Pitt video content right here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Whether it's a Morning Pitt video like we put out every day, Monday through Friday, every morning like this one, or whether it's our live Panther-Lair show that we do on Wednesday nights at 8:30 p.m. when we go live and we have a conversation about Pitt sports, or it's our post-game shows on Saturdays after the Pitt football games. You'll never miss any of it if you subscribe to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. So like this video and subscribe to the YouTube channel. It would be mighty swell if you did. And certainly there was a lot that was mighty swell about Pitt's performance at the Peterson Events Center last night. Panthers opened the 2022-2023 college basketball season with an 80-58 victory over Tennessee Martin. And I think going into that game, I don't know if many of us had many expectations for Tennessee Martin and what UT Martin might be. We knew Parker Stewart, knew they had their leading scorer back in KJ Simon, but it wasn't, I didn't know what was expected of UT Martin this year. I think they were picked third or fourth in the Ohio Valley Conference. A team that won like 8 or 9 games last year, won 4 games in the conference last season. You didn't expect them to be world beaters, but you probably didn't expect St. Francis, PA or the Citadel to be world beaters either. And so because of that recent history in season openers against, low major, mid-major programs, I think there was a little bit of apprehension. A lot of uncertainty about Pitt, a lot of unknowns, a lot of new guys, counting on a lot of players who hadn't, done anything in a Pitt uniform to this point, at least in a regular season game. We all saw the exhibition games, but that was Clarion and Edinboro. Once the level of competition stepped up, how would those players perform? And despite all the uncertainty and despite all the things that we really didn't know about coming into this game last night, I got to think you came out of it feeling pretty good, because there was a lot to like from Pitt's performance. An 80-58 victory in the season opener. Panthers shoot under 40% for the game. They shoot under 27% from 3. They commit 15 turnovers. Those are all the negatives. But boy, howdy, were there a lot of positives. And it starts with Blake Hinson. And we could talk about Blake Hinson and his scoring last night. 27 points, 9 of 18 from the floor, 4 of 12 from 3, 13 rebounds, a double-double in his Pitt debut. And we could talk about Hinson and how he played. But I got to be honest, one thing about Blake Hinson, and we saw it a little bit in the exhibition games, but we really saw it last night, is the energy and the attitude that he brings. If you think about that situation where he got the double, where there was, 4 flagrant fouls called? 1 on Hinson, 1 on Nelly Cummings, and 2 on Parker Stewart. Ended up getting Stewart kicked out of the game. There was the incident that sort of precipitated it all, of Hinson and Stewart kind of getting tangled up with their arms, and didn't really make sense of why Stewart would keep his arm linked in with Hinson, and maybe Hinson was sort of holding on a little bit too long, and Stewart pushes Hinson to the ground, but I'm pretty sure it would take a lot more effort than Stewart appeared to deploy in order to throw a guy like Blake Hinson to the ground, so maybe Hinson embellished a little bit there. But when he bounced up and went right to the student section and started firing those kids up, I like seeing that. And you see some of you see the way he plays, you see the energy he brings on the court, you see the attitude that he plays with. There was something about the approach last season and what Pitt wanted to be last year and what we all talked about with Pitt last year, and it never really, in their best moments, like that 3-game winning streak in the ACC, it kind of came through. But for the most part, they were never able to do it consistently. But what they really wanted to do, and they talked about dragging teams down to the muck, they wanted to be an annoying team to play against. And not annoying in terms of, not annoying in terms of whining or complaining or something like that, but annoying in terms of just always sort of being in your face and always being physical and always being just, a game that even if you won at the end would leave you kind of aggravated and frustrated because of how you had to deal with this team for the past 40 minutes. And I feel like Blake Hinson might actually bring a little bit of that. And it's not just Hinson. I mean, you see the energy from Greg Elliott as well. You see how he carries himself on the floor and how fired up he gets. And look, I mean, like we talk about things like energy and attitude and getting fired up and all of that. And that's not worth a lot if you get outscored. That's not worth a lot if you can't shoot. That's not worth a lot if you lose games. But in games that they're winning, I think it can be a tremendous asset. And I think we can look back at some games and say, boy, Blake Hinson was a spark plug for this team. Or boy, Greg Elliott was a spark plug for this team because of the way they play, because of what they bring on the court, not just in their shooting or their rebounding or their passing or anything like that, but because of sort of their personalities. Their energy, their excitement to be here, their excitement to be playing for this team, their excitement to be playing at this level, and I think it's infectious, and I think it wears off on their teammates, the guys who need it to wear off on them. And there's sort of an interesting dynamic, between you look at a Blake Hinson, you look at a Greg Elliott, and then you look at Nelly Cummings, who I don't want to say he's the opposite. I think he's a guy with a lot of energy. He's a really positive attitude. He's very excited to be here. But he's also very much a calming force on the court. He's a floor general. He's a point guard who can kind of run the team on the floor. And Jamarius Burton is a little bit of that as well. He's not... You watch Greg Elliott and you watch Blake Hinson and then you watch Jamarius Burton and you watch Nelly Cummings, and there's excitement and energy out of those guys, out of Cummings and Burton. But they're not like Hinson and Elliott. And I think the balance there... The sort of contrast of those two sets of players, having them on the court together, it balanced itself really well last night. And I think all those guys played really well. Burton finished with a great stat line: 10 points, 5 rebounds, and 7 assists. An outstanding stat line for him. Cummings had 8 points and 7 assists. He had 3 rebounds. Greg Elliott scored 11 points, 4 of 9 from the floor, 3 of 7 from 3. He also grabbed 4 rebounds. You can run down the list. Federico, 13 points and 7 boards. Guillermo Diaz-Graham, 4 points, 8 rebounds, 2 assists, 2 fouls, 2 turnovers. He just, you had a little bit of everything out of Guillermo in that one. Federico had 3 blocks. Nike Zabandi blocked 2 shots. Jorge Diaz-Graham blocked 2 shots. They had a bunch of steals. They had 6 steals in this game. Just a really good all-around performance from Pitt last night, and a really encouraging all-around performance on so many levels. Whether it was the 3-point shooting, and they shot 26.8%, so it's not like they were nailing the shots. Particularly early in the game, they were cold. But I talked about this in the preseason. I talked about this yesterday on the Morning Pitt when we were kind of previewing the team. I talked about it a lot throughout the last couple of weeks, maybe longer. That this team, I thought, would shoot better from 3 than previous Pitt teams under Jeff Capel. But just as important, well, almost as importantly, they would be willing to shoot a lot from 3. I've often pointed out, when you look at the stats from last season, Pitt was one of the worst 3-point shooting teams in the ACC. They were at the bottom of the pack. They weren't dead last, but they were 13th in the conference in made 3-point shooting percentage. They were next to last in 3-pointers attempted. So not only did they not shoot very well, they didn't shoot very often. They attempted 548 3-point shots last season. 3-point attempts, 548. That's an average of about 17 per game. Last night, they attempted 41. Now, they only made 11 of them. You don't want to go 11 of 41 from 3 every game, because you're going to probably lose a few if you shoot like that. But the willingness to fire up threes, the willingness to attempt 41 3-pointers. We haven't seen a Pitt team with that kind of willingness to pull the trigger in a long time. Hinson attempted 12. Cummings attempted 8. Greg Elliott attempted 7. Nike Zabandi attempted 5. Nate Santos attempted 4. Even though he went 0 for 4. Even though Cummings went 1 for 5. Even though Burton went 1 of 3. Hinson was 4 of 12. These guys were willing to pull the trigger. And if you keep doing that, you're going to give teams something to think about. And I don't think they're going to be, sub 27% every game shooting from 3. I think they're going to be able to shoot better than that. I think they're going to have games where they shoot north of 40%. I think they will balance out a little bit. I think they'll be a streaky shooting team, but I think they'll have really hot games. If you have a few really hot games and you keep up the volume of shots, teams are going to have to respect that. And then when John Hughley finally does return, now you're going to be a real dangerous team to contend with. It's just an outstanding performance. I mean, overall, I think Jeff Capel will find plenty to dislike about this game. I don't think there's any question. 15 turnovers is a whole lot, and that's good. You'd love to play a perfect, flawless game, but the reality is when it's early in the season like this, you want things to coach on, and they've got plenty of things to coach on coming out of this one. But there's also a whole lot to feel encouraged about. There's a whole lot to feel optimistic about. There's a whole lot to feel positive about with the way Pitt played last night, opening the regular season with a 22-point win. It's hard to argue with that. That's a good way. It's a good way to start, particularly when you look around the ACC and you see Florida State lose to Stetson or whoever they played. And you know what? You actually don't need to look around the ACC to find comparison points and say, well, it's better than that. You can look at Pitt last year and the year before. They haven't won a season opener in 3 years. So breaking that streak of St. Francis and the Citadel, no matter who they were playing last night, breaking that streak's a positive. So good start for Jeff Capel, good start for Pitt, and I think we'll have 4 days or so of some optimism here, where Pitt fans can feel pretty positive about Pitt basketball, and then on Friday night we'll find out in the backyard basket brawl. We'll get a better sense, and we'll find out what West Virginia is. We'll see over the course of this week what we really think that team is supposed to be. But whether you think they're supposed to be good or whether you think they're supposed to be bad, and I think they were picked near the bottom of the Big 12, regardless of what you think West Virginia is, if Pitt can get a solid to impressive win over the Mountaineers on Friday night, that's going to go a long way toward increasing the hype for this team. I picked them to go 16-15. I picked them to go 8-3 in the non-conference and 8-12 in the ACC. I'm not going to change that prediction just yet, not based off one game against Tennessee Martin, but like I say, it was a pretty encouraging performance. And you keep up some of those things like the energy and the 3-point attempts. Work on your shooting efficiency, of course. Cut down on the turnovers, but you're going to be playing pretty well, particularly once heading into that time, whenever it is that John Hughley returns. So, good game for Pitt last night. Good start to the 2022-2023 season. Football, some personnel notes, some items to cover there, and the first thing we have to talk about before we even get into the like the depth chart, like we always talk about the new 2 deep on Tuesdays here. Before we even get into that, there was some negative news that came out. It was Dayon Hayes, the junior defensive end, arrested early Sunday morning, or I guess late Sunday night, early Monday morning on misdemeanor assault charge stemming from a domestic incident. Not a good look in the least. And it has nothing to do with Dior Johnson and sort of the proximity to that event. It's not a good look in the least for Pitt football. It's not a good look in the least for Dayon Hayes or anyone involved in this situation. Pat Narduzzi put out a statement saying there would be team discipline, and that discipline would remain private while they wait for the legal process to pan out. Hayes was removed from the official depth chart, so he's no longer listed there. He was listed as a backup defensive end previously, or at least since he came back from his injury. He is not on the depth chart this week. I'm guessing that the internal team discipline will be a indefinite suspension, but we'll see. If Hayes practices this week, and we'll see if he, obviously, if he plays this weekend at Virginia. Pat Narduzzi has largely stayed out of these kinds of situations. He's not really had his team and the players on his team get into trouble like this. There have been a few incidents along the way. I think Tyler Boyd and Rory Blair the one off season, both had I forget it was a drunk driving or a reckless driving, something like that. And then obviously Alex Bookshire a couple years later had a legal issue. they've largely stayed out of those problems. They haven't really had much like that happening. And so this one sort of comes out of nowhere. It's a little bit of a surprise, both with the fact that it involves Dayon Hayes and the fact that it involves a Pitt football player, because we haven't seen a lot of that over the years. We'll see what happens. It cuts into Pitt's defensive end depth, obviously. But, their main contributors, I think, are still Haba Baldonado and John Morgan and Deslin Alexandra. But it was nice to have a four-man rotation. Now, I would assume Chris Maloney or Bam Brima will slide into part of that rotation alongside those other three guys that I mentioned. So that was one change to the depth chart this week, in addition to just being some pretty considerable personnel news. The only other, there were a couple other changes. One was along the offensive line. This was sort of more housekeeping than anything really notable. Matt Gonsalves listed as the starting left tackle. Gabe Hoyes listed as the starting right tackle. Previously, the last few weeks, particularly since Carter Warren was announced as being out for the season, they had Branson Taylor listed as the starting left tackle ahead of Ryan Baer, and then Gonsalves or Hoy starting at right tackle. But the reality is they had Gonsalves starting at left tackle the last few games and Hoy starting at right tackle. And I think in the game against Syracuse, the last few series, they had Branson Taylor out there at left tackle. But for the most part, it was Gonsalves and Hoy. And the depth chart now reflects that, of Gonsalves listed ahead of Taylor at left tackle, Gabe Hoy listed ahead of freshman Ryan Baer at right tackle. So that, it's a housekeeping update. It's a clerical update on the depth chart, and now the depth chart more accurately reflects the reality of the situation. The other change, the other one that was interesting, is at punter, where Pitt went with the rare 3-punter designation on the depth chart. Cam Guess or Sam Vanderhaar or Caleb Junko. And, I don't even know what to make of it. Vanderhaar was out a week or two. He had an injury thing. Cam Guest punted, I think at Louisville or Carolina, I forget which one it was, and got hurt. And Caleb Junko came in and looked pretty good. I guess that might have been the Louisville game, and then they went back to Guest for the Carolina game or whatever it was. So this game, this past Saturday's against Syracuse, Vanderhaar punted the first time. And then Guest came out and punted 3 times in a row, culminating with that 2-yard punt. It was a high snap. He just barely got the punt off, and it basically went into the back of a player. Junko punted the next 2 times, and then for the biggest punt of the game, the 4th down punt on, basically Pitt's final possession, they brought Vanderhaar back out, and he dropped it right at the 1 for Servassier Dennis to cover. So, I don't know if they're going to keep rotating. I'm not, Pat Narduzzi said they're obviously going to bring more than one punter to Virginia this week, just because they always bring more than one punter in case somebody gets hurt. Will they keep rotating in the game? It might be a feel thing. I think that was largely what they did. I think they had different guys that do different things, and in different situations they wanted different punters on the field. And so they might, who knows what they're going to do. But the internet was mildly amused on Monday at Pitt listing 3 punters on the depth chart. So, we'll see. I might go with Junko, personally. I like how he punted. But, ultimately, there was not a lot to really write home about other than Vanderhaar's punt at the 1. I mean, that was the key. All right, and then our other thing that we always do on Tuesdays, we take a quick look around the Coastal Division, kind of see what happened with the Coastal teams over the weekend. It started Friday night. Duke went to Boston College, won that game 38-31. It's a 1-touchdown finale, but I mean, the reality is Duke was up by 10 points, I think, with 17 seconds to go, so it was still a two-score game, with 17 seconds left to play. So, it comes out as a 1-touchdown game, but I think Duke was in a little bit more control than that. The Blue Devils continue to be pretty strong with Riley Leonard at quarterback. He ran for 96 yards and a touchdown in that game. He threw for 158 and another touchdown. He's sort of the driving force. Duke ran for 232 yards. They're averaging better than 200 yards per game on the ground. Duke's a dangerous team. Duke is a really solid team, a dangerous team. They're 6-3 right now, and Pitt obviously has to get past Virginia first. But that game against Duke in the home finale is going to be a tough one. This is not going to be a walk in the park. Carolina went to Virginia. Carolina won 31-28. That was a game that, Virginia was up. Virginia was up 14-10 at halftime. Carolina eventually, sort of turned that, not quickly, but somewhat quickly, into a lead by the end of the third quarter. They were up 24-21. Then early in the fourth quarter, they scored again, so it was 31-21. It only finishes the 3-point game because Virginia scored in the final 3 minutes or so. But ultimately, Brennan Armstrong continues to not be all that great. 232 yards, 1 interception passing. He did run for 2 touchdowns, so that's going to be something to keep an eye out here. Virginia somehow kept Drake May to under 300 passing yards, although he threw for 2 touchdowns. May also ran for 74 yards and a score. Carolina just inches closer to clinching the Coastal Division. With that win over Virginia, Pitt is officially eliminated. Pitt, Virginia, and Virginia Tech are all officially eliminated. Carolina is sitting at the top of the Coastal at 5-0. They have not clinched yet, but if they win this week, and forget who they're playing this week. They are at Wake Forest. If they win that game, they will clinch the Coastal. So that's kind of what that's where it's all inevitably heading anyway. Carolina's 8-1. They're 5-0 in the ACC. They're number 17 in the college football playoff rankings. That number is going to go up, I would think, because they're looking really good and they have a great quarterback. And it's that's what you need sometimes. That can have a huge impact. Georgia Tech at Virginia Tech, a 28-27 win for the Yellow Jackets. They trailed by 12 going into the fourth quarter. It was 28-16. Scored a touchdown on a 56-yard pass. Zach Pyron, playing for Jeff Sims, who's been hurt. There was a touchdown to get cut the lead to 5, and then Pyron ran for a touchdown with about 3.5 minutes left to go to put the Yellow Jackets up 28-27, which was the final. Those two teams, Georgia Tech's 4-5 overall. They're 3-3 in the ACC. Virginia Tech's been eliminated for a while. They're 2-7 right now, 1-5 in the conference. That miserable season continues for Virginia Tech. And speaking of misery, final game in the Coastal Division this past weekend, Florida State at Miami. Miami 45-3. And they scored a field goal about 6 minutes into the game and did not score another point after that. Tyler Van Dyke played a little bit, 4 of 8 for 24 yards, and then he left. Looks like he is hurt again or continuing to nurse the same injury. And they really couldn't do anything after that. Jake Garcia, 1 of 2 for 1 yard. Ja'Curry Brown, 5 of 9 for 37 yards and a pick. Miami's passing game in total, 10 of 19 for 62 yards and 2 interceptions. Henry Parrish, 6 carries for 14 yards. Miami ran for $126 total. It's bad in Coral Gables right now. And I haven't seen any of the latest news reports, but it's going to be interesting to see what happens with Tyler Van Dyke. Couple injuries this season, couple games missed due to injury. He's hurt again. How much does he try and push it? You know what I mean? How does he play the rest of the season? Obviously, Miami's sitting at 4-5, wants to at least get bowl eligible out of their final 3 games. They need to win 2. Who do they? Obviously, they close with Pitt. Check their schedule real quick. Before that, they're at Georgia Tech and at Clemson. So there could be 2 wins in there. But the way Miami's playing, and if particularly if Tyler Van Dyke does not come back, I'm not sure they get 2 wins out of that stretch. I think if Tyler Van Dyke is not playing and Pitt looks okay over the next 2 weeks, I would imagine Pitt would be favored on the road at Miami, where they've won once since 1963. Now, Pitt has to do its own thing there. We can't really assume anything on that front because Pitt's offense isn't in a great way either. But right now they're looking better than Miami's offense, which is saying something about Miami. It really is. So that's a tough situation there for Mario Cristobal as he tries to move through his first season with the Hurricanes. Overall, you look at the Coastal Division right now. Carolina's undefeated at 5-0 in ACC games. Duke and Georgia Tech have won 3 each. Pitt and Miami are both 2-3. Virginia and Virginia Tech 1-5 each. It's a matter of time until Carolina clinches this division. I don't think anybody's going to catch them. I don't think anybody's going to really have a shot. It's just a matter of who else can get bowl eligible. Duke is there at 6-3. Pitt has 5 wins. Georgia Tech and Miami both have 4 wins. Then Virginia and Virginia Tech 3-2 respectively. Virginia Tech can't get bowl eligible. They're 2-7 with 3 games left to play. Virginia, in theory, could. They need to win out, which seems unlikely given the way that team has played this season. Pitt, Miami, Georgia Tech. Pitt needs 1 more win for bowl eligibility. Obviously, Georgia Tech and Miami need 2 more each. I think it's going to be a challenge for those 2 teams to find 2 wins out of these final 3 games. Schedule, regardless of schedule, just because of how those teams look right now. It's going to be an eternal source of regret and disappointment that Pitt didn't seize the opportunity of the Coastal Division this year, much in the way that they did last year. They did 4 years ago in 2018. This Coastal Division's not strong. It doesn't look great. Carolina is the main competition, the biggest test. And with a better offense, they could have competed better with Carolina. Not to mention, beating Georgia Tech and Louisville. But so it goes, right? As it relates to Pitt in the Coastal Division this year, it's an opportunity missed. And, it's unfortunate because the division's just not very good. Just not very good right now. But Pitt's focus is on Virginia this weekend, Saturday in Charlottesville. Of course, we'll have plenty of conversation and discussion about that game leading into the end of the week right here on the Morning Pitt. We'll keep talking about Pitt basketball heading into the backyard basket brawl on Friday night at the Peterson Event Center. And then, like I say, we'll continue previewing Pitt, Virginia as we move through the week. Make sure you like this video and subscribe to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com for all of our exclusive Pitt video content. And then check out the website, Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com. The most comprehensive source of Pitt sports news on the internet. All day, every day, people are online at Panther-Lair.com talking about Pitt sports. You should be there too. Panther-Lair.com. Thanks so much for watching this video. We appreciate it. Have a great Tuesday, and we will talk to you Wednesday morning for the Morning Pitt right here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com.